thought and written about, and from there acted upon, actually come out of a direct engagement with this kind of material. When you look at Alphonse and the Promenade de Paris, which I won't show you today, it struck me that the model for that text isn't an architectural treatise in any sense. It's a treatise of natural history. Graphically, it's the same. The graphic techniques are the same. It's all, the similarity seems to me to be, it's at least an idea that I want to defend. Now, let's get into Paris a little bit here. This is a picture, 1834, Gare Saint-Lazare. The trains that are taking, small trains that are bringing people into and out of Paris. It's a symmetrical, monumental space, a space of appearance, of representation. This is what Saint-Lazare looks like somewhat later. We have this strange X-shaped bridge, which is a way of distributing traffic flows at a difficult point in the city, the Place de l'Europe, I think it's called now. 2 layers of circulation, both open, and the structure in iron, without any particularly strong representative, disons, intention in terms of representation, although it's come to be Paris for us with time, of course. Here, so there was that's one instance in which we're not really, things aren't covered up. We're digging into the ground, but you know, but it's still open. But it's actually pretty much the exception. Here's another interesting moment. Alphonse at the Butte Chaumont. There are, of course, other parks in which this happens. A train line that's very seamlessly and elegantly integrated into the landscape, as if we were in the country somewhere and seeing a train line go by. Frederick Law Olmsted would be doing pretty much the same thing at the same time in the U.S. In his parks, but he's also looking at American landscapes and trying to get a sense of what it takes to create, to situate a train line in the landscape in a sublimated way, rather than having a train line look like a wound that's been inflicted on the surface of the city. So here, there's a kind of a seamless joining of underground with above ground, and in a way, the underground is kind of caught up in the representative scheme that's operating at the surface. Now, let's just start to look at one of the things that's difficult for me about this talk is that everything I'm talking about is known, but I'm hoping that I'm cutting across it in a way that it's all cutting across it in a way that's a bit new. This is Belgrand. Belgrand is the engineer who worked for Haussmann and to create a system of the water system, which is really the great accomplishment of the Haussmannian renovations. It's quite an extraordinary system. The water for it comes from the Van region outside of the city. It's brought in on aqueducts. The water then disappears into a system, an underground system, which is extremely comprehensive. By the time Belgrand is finished, Paris will be a much cleaner and much healthier city than it was before. This was a part of what was important for Haussmann. It was perhaps more important still for Louis-Philippe, for Napoleon III, excuse me, who was, unlike Haussmann, had a certain concern for the plight of the working class in Paris, and for the quality of life, hygiene, and sort of hygiene in the city, etc. Of course, everything Haussmann did actually pushed the working class out of the city, but that's another story. What's interesting, I don't want to go into this a lot, but I want to evoke it for a particular reason. before I go into it a little further, here is just an example of one page of the very numerous atlases that are being published at the time that are considering the different functions of the city, but in quantitative terms. The systemic thinking that's attached with function is linked to quantitative thinking. It's how much merchandise can you move? How many people can you move? How much money are you making? Et cetera, et cetera. Now, let's go straight to the heart of a little problem here. These are pages taken from the Belgrand treatise, which starts with a history of Roman aqueducts, and particularly those that there are remains of in France, and that are therefore a part of the image of the French landscape. Now, why is this all complicated? Because at the same time that we're looking at a functional system which is going to be hidden underground, we're also involved here in something which is clearly intended to be representative. Okay, Paris is to be the new Rome. To put things clearly, Paris is the new Rome. Paris is going to shine over the whole world. It's going to be the most perfected city. These are the most perfect city. It will have resolved its functional problems to a point where it will achieve a state of perfection. It's a very positivist idea that the more rational, as time goes on, as we become more and more rational and more reasoned in our approach to the world, we organize our lives better, and we organize the space around ourselves better. It's an idea that, of course, doesn't survive the 20th century, but it's still at work here, and in an odd sort of way. The idea here is that this will be Rome again, but better. Now, so we start in Belgrand. We have these beautiful little engravings of different elements underground, shown in plan, shown in section, all beautifully built in stone. So that even in this space under the ground that has no exterior, in spite of everything, there is something like a representative surface, because all these things are indeed beautifully built in stone and can be are worthy of being represented in beautiful engravings like these. But or this one, for example, where we start to see the layout of big pieces of the system. Now, what I wanted to point out, and this is why I wanted to go to Belgrand, is that look how he finishes the treatise. He finishes it with these drawings where we'll actually see what these underground sewers are going to look like. And these images look like photographs, but in fact they're not. They're engravings. They're completely different from any other engravings that are being shown in the book. In fact, if anything, what they evoke is the kinds of engravings that scientists are doing these days at that time. Why? Because scientists are more and more concerned with being objective, with being really objective. They want to force themselves not to translate the world as they feel it should be or in any idealized form, but as it is. And as a result, photography is a kind of way, a means of capturing the world in which for them, in which the ego of the observer is as absent as it can possibly be. So what they tend to do, but at the same time, photography, even of a great quality, cannot necessarily be as accurate as you'd want. So one of the widespread practices of the time is to photograph and then make engravings that interpret the photographs to give a more precise image than the photograph could ever be. So what we have here is an engraving of a future state, but it looks a whole lot like those other drawings, and as far as I can tell, not much like anything else. And what do they show? They show a space that's clearly not meant to be seen. It's presented here with a fastidious sort of precision, but it's not meant to be seen. It's just meant to function. It's just meant to work. At the same time, what's clear is that in a sense, this is the primary formal vocabulary. This is the architecture of the underground. This is its primary. This is where it starts from. This is its components. These are the components that it's made of. These tubes, these stilts, the conduits of large dimension, but also at times bundles of small conduits, sort of drawn together, et cetera, et cetera. Things go where they need to. Now, what's interesting, actually these drawings are really, they're almost surreal. They look like Max Ernst engravings in an odd sort of way. If you look closely, there are little letters on this one that point out the different elements, and each element is then described objectively somewhere else in the text. Okay, so that's so there we get the sense that there's a kind of a I mean, there are a lot of things that could be said. Obviously, all this works, but what's interesting is that as it may well work, it may allow technicians to communicate, it may make it possible for these spaces to be built, but we're already sensing that there's a problem here, something about how a city must be a space of appearance, in a way. This is a book I want to show to go into another problem quickly. It's a series of documents done by someone named Lenoir, who was mainly an archaeologist, a cartographer of archaeological sites that was put to work by Haussmann and people before him to capture all those spaces, all those things that are about to be scratched out of the plan of the city, the ground of the city. And here he's been asked to make a series of maps that show, they're very beautiful, the book is actually big like that, that show the new Palais de, the new Supreme Court of France, and also the Central Police Station, as they're going to be imposed upon an existing tissue. Okay, these spaces will have representative facades, but behind them there will be immense spaces that are organized in a purely functional way, and that just clearly aren't representable at all. They just go on and on and on. They're repetitive. They're just simply made to work and not to be seen. That's the orange that you see superimposed on the existing elements, which are in yellow. This is also what you're seeing here. It's actually a bit complicated to read these plans, because the yellow signifies what is existing and will be altered, or what is basically it's what is existing and will be altered. So as a result, it draws out these new streets that are going to be put into the city plan. Here's another view of it. What I want to say here is, think about that one of there's the underground, but the other great sort of series of functional spaces that Maxime Ducamp visits one by one and describes this, in great detail, are all these back spaces, be it at the post office, the National Library, the police station, et cetera, et cetera. All these buildings of a whole new dimension in Paris, which are essentially functional entities. One building that I want to cite, which gives a bit of a particular perspective on this question of the relation between architecture and questions of function, is the Bibliothèque Sainte-Geneviève. Here you see it in plan. The plan at the very bottom of the page is the basement. So what you're seeing is a central heating system. Le Corbusier would be happy, or at least his associate would. You have two furnaces, and those furnaces feed through tubes, feed into a series of columns which are actually hollow, and that bring heat up into the center of the space, in the center of the reading room on the floor above. Here, so the basis of that, the central axis of this building which is a structural line, but between it are these closed-in, boxed-in spaces in which you have the heating system. You have the heat kind of actually emanating from the center of the space out towards the tables where people are working. There's a seamless kind of integration of the heating function into the architecture, and from the functionality of the functional dimensions of the building to its more representative ones as well. This is, I think, an exception. I think that Labrouste is a particularly remarkable architect in that he makes very beautiful, comfortable buildings that that just sort of somehow reconcile things that don't seem to want to go together. But nobody else seems to do it, and I don't think a lot of people want to do it. I think people want to often push the distinction between functionality. There's a story about Haussmann that I enjoy, which is that Baltard, who designed the many steel and iron market buildings in the city, that Baltard actually didn't like that kind of art. That wasn't what he wanted to do. What he wanted to do was to make architecture, buildings cased in stone, but which used iron and glass, where he felt it would be nice to use it, you know, or where he could actually create a big volume that he needs or whatever. And Haussmann is purportedly said to him, well, you're such an awful architect. All that architecture that you're putting around the outside, why don't we just get rid of it? It's expensive, it serves no purpose, just give us what we need. There's a little mistake here in the order. Okay, there's something missing, but it doesn't matter. This section, we're into another section now, a third section, which is called At the Surface. I'm sorry, I've probably zapped out the little page. Anyway, what I wanted to say is that as the notion of function literally takes root in Paris, grows up in the ground, develops behind, within the volumes, hidden away in the volumes of this new city, there's a whole other way of considering the city as a body, which is very different. And it's something that historians and geographers are very, very interested in. This is an image taken from a book, a very large universal geography encyclopedia by someone named Élisée Reclus, who frequented a lot of urbanists, among them Patrick Geddes. He is in that sense an extremely important figure in the history of urban planning. He worked with Geddes on the project for on a number of projects for the Universal Exhibitions in Paris in the late 19th century. He actually influenced thought on planning in ways that are really quite important as a result. Here, what do we have? We have a page in this treatise where he's in the volume about France. We're in Grenoble, and this is an engraving that was done from a photograph. So the photograph was made, and then the engraver, whose name was Taylor, redid the photograph to produce an even more precise image, and one that in some sense concentrates the meaning of the photograph a little bit more. Now, at the same time that Élisée Reclus is working, let's say geographers like Reclus are working in a time when different social sciences are actually taking root in the universities. They're actually creating themselves as disciplines in the university. Geography, sociology, and social statistics, for example, are three fields that have invented themselves as proper university disciplines. The historians, one very great historian kind of summed up, the geographers and historians seem to get along very well. okay, whereas the sociologists don't. They're a whole other group. We'll get back to them in a minute. Élisée Reclus is also close to a very important French historian named Michelet, who said at one point that France is a person. La France est une personne. He's also a figure who's close to another geographer, the geographer who will, before long, define in a very clear way what the new French geography is. It's called human geography. The person's name is Paul Vidal de la Blache. Now, Vidal de la Blache is a very particular figure. He too has an idea of the city as being, of how the places we live at can be looked at as if they were bodies, but looked at from the exterior. The question of appearance, how things appear, is very important. He says of France, of the whole country, that it has a personality. Okay, I'm going to read a quotation, a translation I made of a quotation. It seems almost paradoxical to even ask a question like this. Is France a geographic being? The response isn't as simple as one would think. Obviously, taking things from a geological point of view, France doesn't possess an individuality. But when you start adding to that plant life, animals, the flora and fauna, climate, you're starting to move towards something which is a little more like a being. But what really gets us there, what really makes this idea of France as a personality exist, is that in fact the country is formed by people, by human action on its surface. That the landscape is carved out, formed, organized, exploited, adapted to, and that in that sense it reflects something back, something like a personality. Now, who I mentioned with respect to the idea of the organ. At some point, Bergson says basically that somebody who is interested in how things function, in getting behind appearances, in understanding things as functional systems, is someone who has a speculative intelligence. But you can't act in the world. You can't live in the world and act. You can't make your life in the world with speculative intelligence. It doesn't work. What he says is that when a mind that's turned towards action, towards living in the world and towards action, has to, and this is where I'll make the quote exactly, has to consider all forms as they are now, even natural ones, as if they were artificial and temporary. All the depth of the object has to be erased, and all that should be left is the surface, what can be seen and known as we kind of interact with it. Okay? So here, a little digression. It seems to me that if you read Bruno Latour today, who incidentally is totally fascinated with the intellectual figures of the period I'm talking about, this is pretty much exactly the attitude that you'll find. This idea, a form of radical empiricism that's based on the idea that really what you want to do is understand the world as you can know it in trying to move through it, to deal with it, to make something out of it. Here, so mapping, okay, but the maps have to be defined based on a very concrete, empirical, immediate experience of things. And they shouldn't translate anything that you can't understand or that you don't feel you need to know because of the experience you've had by being there. Now, just to get a little bit further into this, the surface of the city, this personality of the city or of the landscape, is something that, of course, changes in time. It's a kind of there's a sort of an almost archaeological dimension that can sort of appear as one looks at surfaces, because they change in time, they evolve, they have layers. And the idea of the palimpsest that's become so widespread these days kind of connects with that. This idea of the surface as something that changes and that leaves as it changes, is sort of marked with signs of what it was before, and also the idea, if you like, that what you look at that may not mean what it may not be what it once was, can have it may not be interesting to know what the different elements in a landscape were. What's interesting is to know what you could now think to do with them. And so there's this kind of, if you want, when you're on the surface of things, when you stay on the surface of things in the ways that people like Marcel Poet, who pulled together, who I'm showing here, a page of a book which is called Une vie de cité, The Life of the City. This is the kind of attitude that we're invited to have. Okay, so basically, what I've wanted to show is that you have to imagine that Le Corbusier, writing Urbanisme in 1929, is going radically in the direction of a highly conceptual approach to the body, around the notion of function, and that sort of radicalization of the approach to the body is the one that will, in a sense, win. It's the one that will dominate architectural thought up until Le Corbusier starts to run into problems with the young architects that he does his Siam conferences with, like the Smithsons. That the process of separation, separation of the functionalist perspective in architecture is something that starts after the war with the Smithsons and continues up until our time. And I think it's only now that there's a form of pragmatist, surface-related thinking about the body in the realm of architecture that is entirely resurfaced. Now, I just wanted to show these few images to close up and to get us back to Le Corbusier and beyond. Here's an image I found that I find interesting. It's basically what we've got a metro line, a metro station that's going to be constructed at Denfert-Rochereau, but in order to construct it, the sewer system, Belgrand's sewer system, is going to have to be reworked. Parts of it are going to have to be knocked out and rebuilt. Here we're clearly into a situation where the lines under the city have been drawn as directly as they possibly could. There hasn't been a kind of an overall geometric order that would allow things to neatly fit into one another, around one another, etc. We're into underground. It's a whole other game. Things just simply go where they can. They take the straightest path they can. When they run into things that are in their way, they go around them. There's not the same there's not the same sort of discipline that one can find at the surface, which is largely determined, at least up till now, by simple geometric figures. Okay, other little element, of course. Here's someone like, this is the very famous work done by someone named Eugène Henao, who Le Corbusier was extremely fond of in the 1910s. The idea here is to think about buildings, streets, metros, sewer systems, all of it, above ground and below ground, as one integrated, seamless system. The dreams that Le Corbusier has about that are engendered in the Voisin plan start here in some real sense. Now, okay, for memory, another image of by von Esteren from this time where this is an image of another city. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. It's Budapest. Okay, now this is what it all, in a sense, comes down to. This is the Siam grid with its horizontal bands that correspond to different functions: working, inhabiting, cultivating the body and the spirit, circulating, etc. And a series of themes that are transversal themes that are then developed. This is the Siam grid was a real machine for conquering the world. As you can see, it was made to be folded up, wrapped up, and sent all over the world to preach the new good word about the functional city. It is indeed something that was that proved to be of an extraordinary efficiency, that did end up having a critical success, which is enormous. It really, it's from here, but it's also the document that, in a sense, crystallized opposition to the notion of function and started and was, as a result, if you want, the beginning of the end. Okay, thank you. What I find really quite amazing here is that there's absolutely no libidination of the underground in any of this. There's nothing to do with desire. There's nothing to do with what we might feel we need to hide away. It's very strange. I think we have a much more complex emotional relationship with the underground than what's being expressed than what we see in these early ideas about it. It's a space that we inhabit. It has a kind of a pull on the imagination that's very strong, and that's not the same as what we see here. Also, I think that we can probably understand better today the very Bergsonian idea of this time, of the time that we're looking at in this talk. If we consider that functions aren't things that functions are things that evolve. They're things that never stop changing. One of the particular things about Le Corbusier, and I would say the people who came before him even more, is the idea that the functions of the city are cast in stone. Once we've defined what they are, we've just got to find better and better ways of accommodating them. But in fact, the sense of need now, new needs, new desires, can actually change what we consider to be a function. I would put it in that way. I mean, it's I would say that you'd have to start understanding how the notion of the function might not be the same today. You might have to read Bergson, or you might have to read Deleuze, who's actually very Bergsonian, and who's obviously very interested in Bergson as well. Okay. Par rapport à Élisée Reclus, alors, essentiellement, ce que je voulais dire, c'est que, enfin bon, j'aurais dû peut-être montrer quelques images en plus. Dans la géographie universelle d'Élisée Reclus, on a ces paysages qui sont présentés comme on les voit, comme on les voit alors qu'on est en train de promener. Mais on a aussi énormément de planches qui montrent, par exemple, le pêcheur à Dieppe, comment dans le paysage, dans son milieu, hein, avec ses filets, avec son bateau, l'eau, les falaises, etc. Et si vous voulez, si tu veux, c'est une sorte de vision presque écologique de la vie. Hein. Ce n'est pas la vie au sens des fonctions intérieures d'un corps, mais la vie telle qu'elle est vécue et telle qu'on peut la voir. Et la vie telle qu'on peut, comment dire, comme on peut s'engager avec elle, entrer dans une sorte d'engagement avec elle. Tu vois ce que je veux dire? Donc, du coup, c'est tout est question là du monde tel qu'on l'éprouve en la pratiquant et en se promenant et en voyant comment les autres font. Hein, je le dirais comme ça. Hein. Donc, c'est dans ce sens-là tout à fait une question, comme l'a dit Bergson, de prendre chaque moment comme étant étrange, artificiel, éphémère, voilà,